So these different stages are the sort of initial separation from your day-to-day life, going through this sort of liminal stage at the Confest, I was going to say, which is a hippie sort of conference that people have. Anyway, at the festival, where you're in another time zone. You know, you're not looking at the clock. You're sort of just roaming around. And then at the end of it, you get back in the car and you drive back again. And so that's the sort of the transition, the phases of the festival. It's got this sort of transition into this space, a sort of a space where things happen, different things happen, and then you return. So it's by definition a finite space. And as I said, you know, perhaps you're transformed in that process. So this sort of idea of liminality is this idea of sort of a transition between our everyday lives and this other in-between space, which is not really in our, it's a sort of another space alongside. Another concept that comes up, particularly in these festivals where people go to set up a new site, is the idea of communitas, which is, again, a sort of a notion of levelling. So, you know, I was saying before about carnival inverts power relationships. Well, communitas just sort of tends to the idea that we're all one. We're all one in the same. We're not sort of better or higher or more important, but we're just one mass of humanity, if you like. And that's sort of the idea of this sort of community developing is one that Victor Turner, who's a sort of anthropologist, has written quite a lot about. And he describes communitas as a place where a fellowship sort of exists through ritual, and there's no sort of there's no distinctions made between people. And funnily enough, I think it's not all festivals do this, and you'll see none of the ones I'm showing you do. But I mentioned Confest before, which is a bit of a hippie festival, and probably happens at Meredith as well, that everyone ends up sort of in the mud, all covered, because it's usually rained and it's in the country and there's mud everywhere, and people just end up covered in mud. And so it's almost like they're all sort of mud people together and no distinction between them. In warmer climates, everyone seems to be keen to take their clothes off. So again, it's a sort of a levelling, you know, no distinction of costume. So, you know, these are the more, let's say, romantic sort of visions of how festival might work. But I think we see little elements of them in the festivals that we're familiar with, and I think we can aspire to introducing some of those ideas into the festivals that we create. Another factor in festivals, and this is one that perhaps is more problematic, is the idea of tradition. And when I say tradition, it means so many different things, and there are traditions that are seeped in our cultures. We have our own traditions that are sort of habitual, but particularly in newer countries, and I think of Australia as being one in that it was really only founded in 1900 with federation. We have this idea of sort of inventing traditions, and when I described that ritual at the Meredith Festival of people putting their boot in the air to sort of show this seemingly bizarre sort of action, that's a tradition now that people associate with Meredith. Now, that makes that place special. It's got its own traditions that perhaps only the people there understand, but it's a way of binding that group of Meredith visitors together.